fired and he took a year off and went around and he's been a fairly successful coach since then. He got back into it with the Mavericks, but other college coaches have done that too. But look at this as like almost a sabbatical where you're going to learn, you're going to take this opportunity to become a better coach. Honestly, evaluate your coaching style. Honestly, evaluate how you've been doing. Think this will be painful, but write down a list of the 5 knuckleheads that you've coached, or whatever. Here are the 5 kids I couldn't wait for them to be done or I had the most problems with. And honestly, now that you're not coaching them, honestly assess, is there something I could have done differently? Maybe not to make them go from a knucklehead to like the best player ever, my favorite player ever, but how could I gotten them from a knucklehead to just tolerable? What could I have done? Not what could the kid have done, but what could I have done? Look at everything that you can. How can you become a better coach and more coachable? You're making yourself be coachable to yourself, essentially. I'm not going to be judged on wins and losses right now. I've got no pressure. So I can honestly be introspective, retrospective, whatever that word is. I'm not very smart. That's why I was a coach. No, but, do that first. But second of all, I really, really seriously think that there are a lot of coaches out there dropping the ball right now during COVID because they're not staying connected with their team or not looking at it as I can build up my culture, even though we're not around each other. And the common thing that I hear is, well, they're all zoomed out, or I don't want to give them too much on Zoom, or I don't want to give them too much virtually or whatever. Well, what do you think your kids are doing right now? Like, I mean, they're not reading War and Peace. They're sitting watching the newest thing on Netflix. They're not doing really anything productive. Sorry, no offense to those kids that are, but most kids aren't doing really anything real productive if they're not playing right now. So I'm not saying you got to dominate 5 hours a day with them, but you need to stay in contact with them, stay in touch with them. And, yeah, they're all zoomed out. Well, you don't have a Zoom meeting. Like, we're on Zoom right now with this interview. We're recording this interview on Zoom. You didn't say, hey, Jamie, you want to come on a Zoom meeting with us? You said you want to do a podcast interview. All right. You put lipstick on a pig. You dressed it up. We're doing a Zoom, but you called it something different. So maybe you have a motivational Monday, or maybe you have a chalk talk Tuesday or something, wacky Wednesday. You don't even call it a Zoom. Now that's how you do it, but you do maybe every other day or every day you're doing something for a half an hour with the kids, and it's a different theme every day. So maybe it's a chalk talk one day, maybe it's a pure motivation type stuff, inspiration, hope, vision the next day. Maybe it's wacky Wednesday. I like that, but it's just pure fun. No talking X's and O's, no trying to motivate them like Tony Robbins. It's just wacky, fun stuff. Maybe you have a competition day. Maybe if your games were on Friday, typically, maybe you have on Friday, you have some kind of a competition with the kids. So do something where you're doing something different every day, and you never call it a Zoom session, but they look forward to it a little bit more because it's different. You're mixing it up. It's not always coach lecturing to us. It's not always coach trying to have a chalk talk when we don't even know when we'll play again. No, that was, we haven't had a chalk talk in 10 days, or a week or whatever. So mix it up a little bit, but I think improve yourself as a coach, but then make sure that you're not losing the opportunity to build up your culture, because here's the thing with culture. I mean, there's a lot of things with culture. Your good kids, the kids you can absolutely rely on when quarantine is over, when lockdowns are over, when you get back into playing, whatever it is, no matter what state you're in, those kids are probably still going to be good kids that you can count on. But right now, the kids that are average kids, maybe attitude wise, the kids that you struggle with, the knuckleheads, they're not ticked at you right now because of playing time. They're not ticked at you because you're mad at them because they didn't touch the line, that they didn't go all the way to this spot to set that ball screen. They're not ticked at you right now about that emotional stuff. So you can actually build some bridges or melt some ice with some of those kids now, because there's not that, coach is just being a jerk type thing. So you actually have a great opportunity now to build your culture.
So one of my favorite tweets of yours is the things that all players can do. because that's just kind of one of my things, right? Those are simple things. I'm always control what you can control. And those things are controlling what you can control. My question is though, like, yeah, you can say that to them, but how do you let your players know the importance of these things? How do you show them, especially now in today's world? You look on Twitter, right? What do you see? You see a dunk, you see crossover, break some guy's ankles. You see spectacular and highlights.
Yeah, great question. And sometimes you might have to lead that discussion a little bit, or bring it up to them in a different way of, you're seeing the dunks, you're seeing the flashy stuff, but maybe bring up a player that would be popular to them, or something like that, that isn't in the NBA or is struggling. And maybe why they're struggling or why they didn't make the NBA, or bring up, hey, what do you think about this player in the NBA? And they'll naturally say, oh man, coach, he's sorry, man. He's not any good. And you're like, yeah, but he's making like 1.5 million. You know why he's making 1.5 million? I didn't know he's making that. Well, I can't believe that, man. He's not any good. He's like, yeah, but do you know why he's on a roster? Do you know why he's making that money? And of course they're going to say no, probably. And then you can go into, all right, this is his role, or this is what he does, this, and this. These are three things that he does, and that's what the coach is looking for. But he doesn't even play. Exactly. But he plays in practice, and he gets the guys ready, and he does this, and this, and he's not a headache to the coaches. NBA coaches are really no different than college and high school coaches. They don't need their 15th man to think that they can be the leading scorer. They need their 15th man to not cause problems and not be a headache and not be high maintenance. I need them to be a towel waver. I need them to help their best friend, the athletic trainer, and the water cooler. Those are their two best friends. I need them to help get the water to the starters. I need them to do that kind of stuff. And you know what? Would you do that for $1.5 million? Would you do that for $2 million? Well, your kid's going to be like, of course. Like, it's no different on this team. You do some of that stuff, you might get more opportunity or whatever. But, you can present it that way. But, those 10 things, I appreciate you talking about that. I'm glad you brought that up, because no matter what your status is, what your position on the team, how good you are or not, there's certain things that you can do. And you take like a Kobe Bryant, you take a Steph Curry, you take a LeBron James, or any of those guys. There are other people just as talented, to a degree. I mean, there's guys that jump as high as those guys. There's guys that run as fast. There's guys that maybe can shoot the ball better, but they have something. They do those 10 things as well. The best players are the best players because they do extra, and they do those 10 things. So we normally think of, we see these 10 things all players can do, and naturally our mind goes to, all right, this is for role players. This is for, I even talked about it to start with, the 15th guy on the bench. All right, they can do these things. Well, yeah, but your starters can do these things too. And if your starters are buying in and doing those things, man, they're going to now go from starters to stars. Like, they're going to be big time, because not only do they already have a baseline talent, but now they're losing excuses. They're on time all the time. They're encouraging one another. They're lifting each other up. They're doing all these things that are extra. And so, the more that you can point that stuff out, where you can outwork your talent, whether you're the last man on the bench or the starter. Kobe Bryant outworked his talent. Mm-hmm. All that means is that he had a world of talent to begin with, and he went like out of this world. He took it to another level, because there's plenty of dudes that got drafted in the first round that got like one contract and were out of the league, playing at the YMCA, talking about what should have been, because they didn't have a work ethic, or they had excuses all the time. I knew a guy, and he didn't make it the NBA, but he won the college slam dunk contest a few years ago. He was a stud at the small college level, amazing player. And he got a G League opportunity, and he missed the flight. First game, they cut him. They cut him the next day. I mean, he missed the flight. He's done. All world talent. I mean, the dude is amazing leaper, all world, could shoot all this kind of stuff. Whether he would have ever made the NBA, I don't know that, but he had a shot in the G League. He misses one flight, done. some people will get second or third chances, but for most people, the NBA doesn't mess around. And those spots are valuable, and you've got to find a way to make yourself valuable, whether it's the NBA, college, or high school. I know we don't have I mean, it's not like your whole audience is people going to the NBA or with NBA dreams, but I'm working with some players, or I was working with some players that were on NBA rosters, and they're coming in from college trying to make these NBA rosters. And the thing is, they have no idea what to do during a timeout. They have no idea what to do when they're not playing, because they've never not played in their life, except if they're in foul trouble or it's a blowout or if they're injured. But it's never been a coach's decision. I'm not good enough to play, and their competition has been, all right, am I going to be the first scorer or the second scorer? It's never been, I might not even make the team. So they don't know how to become valuable to their team. Most people think value is just making baskets. But every single player on your team can be the most valuable leader, can be the most valuable teammate. And how can they add value to the team? And most people don't even think about that. What can I do? So yeah, I appreciate that.
To continue on you a little bit, Coach, I'm just curious, you started out, we'll jokingly call it the dark side, but you started out as an AD and a college head coach yourself. What made you decide to pivot and become an author and a motivational speaker? I find that so interesting.
Yeah, the short of it is, I thought I wanted to be an athletic director for a number of years. I wasn't quite ready to be an athletic director, but a great opportunity came for me. So I left a great college basketball team. We had everyone coming back, best seasons ever, set all these records, had everybody coming back, but a great opportunity came along. And I got 2 years into being an AD, and I'm like, I do not want to be in an office all day. And I don't want to be yelled at because we ran out of blue Powerade and they don't want to drink red Powerade. I just, I went to way too many JV swim meets. I wasn't seeing my family. I was being paid a lot of money, but I couldn't use any of the money. And even when I did get away, I went to Vegas once. This has nothing to do, but I went to Vegas once and I forgot my cash at home. So I'm in Vegas with no cash. Terrible. So, but essentially I'm making all this money as an AD and I can't spend it because I'm dealing with concession stands and JV swim meets and gymnastics meets and stuff. But I was like, man, this is not what I want to do. But I'd always had a passion for leadership. Even when I was an AD, we started a student athlete leadership group. We were doing a lot of training with leadership, and I always had a passion, and it stemmed kind of from John Maxwell. John Maxwell has written like over 100 books on leadership. He's amazing. And so I had this passion, and I saw an opportunity to jump into it. A friend of mine had a leadership company down in Atlanta. So I went and worked with him for a year to kind of learn the ropes on the business side of it. And I'd always wanted to be a writer. I have like 25 or 30 book proposals that I've put together over the years. And I wish I had started, one a year, I would have like 25 or 30 books written by now instead of just 3. So I wish I had started earlier, but I always wanted to be a writer, always had a passion for leadership. I want to make the world a better place if I can. I kind of always looked at that as a mission, but I didn't want to like go to some African jungle and translate Bibles or dig wells, which is all great stuff. And I am very happy to provide money to people that go do that. But I like to stay in the US of A, and I like to coach basketball and work with sports. And so I'm like, you know what? Let's do this leadership thing. And so started the podcast, started writing books, started working with teams, caught a few breaks here and there. One of them was working with the Raptors. So that was a huge break for me. And that was really fun. And yeah, so it's been great.
So you talked about it just a little bit, but as an author, like I always think it's interesting where ideas come from. And then I think you led into it a little bit, but when you were a coach, like, were you thinking these things and you're like, hey, I should write these down. I should write a book, or some kind of journal or whatever it may be.
Yeah. I actually, in 2001, I started what was it called? I started you might laugh, but I started online. I got this website. I started my own website, and it was like a journal, and I called it a weblog. And I'm not joking. I had no idea that that was a blog. I called it a web log on my own. And then one of my players said, Coach, I think that's called a blog. I'm like, what? A blog? Yeah. So I was blogging before most people, before I even knew what it was. But yeah, I always like writing. My English teacher didn't think I should be writing, but I liked writing. And so yeah, she actually sent me a card. She sent me a note after my first book and said, not bad for someone that hated English, hated me, and said that they would never, ever write again after college or after high school. But I actually liked writing. I liked storytelling. I just didn't like her. But yeah, she gave us this postcard. And sometimes I look back and I'm like, God, how would I have coached me? I was such a punk at times, but there are those kids out there that are punks that can at least turn out to be halfway decent, somewhat respectable. But, she gave us this postcard, like the last year that we had her in English class with a stamp on it. And she's like, when you get out of college one day, I want you to send this to me and let me know what you're doing. And I said, Mrs. Shannon, I will never send you this postcard. I sent her the postcard once.
Oh,
Yep. I ended up sending her the postcard. I matured. I went away to college and saw the light and stopped being so much of a punk. But anyways, writing. Yeah. A lot of, like, when I started thinking about books, it was always like self-help type books. It wasn't until I got introduced to John Gordon and the fable
yes.
type stuff. And I love those books. They're simple.
Me too.
They're awesome. And like every book seems to be a winner. Every book I enjoy reading. And so I started reading his books maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And I loved them. And I was like, man, I want to write one of those. I just don't know how. And so naturally what I did was there was a guy named Todd Gonware who wrote a book called Lead for God's Sakes. I got him on my podcast, and then I got John Gordon on my podcast, and I picked their brains about how they wrote fables. So I was actually doing some intel. I was doing a scouting report, and I was trying to learn how to write a fable. But I like that. I like that aspect. I like writing the fables. But all the ideas, pretty much for the bus trip, my latest book, pretty much comes from my career as a coach, and then my career as an AD and the teams that I work with, them telling me stories. I wanted to be as realistic as possible.
It's funny. We're talking about culture, and culture is a really important thing for me. And my assistants will make fun of me probably the amount of times I say culture, but as somebody that talks about leadership and culture as much as you do, I'm just really curious if you had to describe for all of our listeners, whether they're high school, college, players, whoever, if you had to describe an elite culture in one sentence, what would you say?
Yeah. This is how we do things. That's a great question. Great question, John. You're right. Cause I'm used to, there's a saying in like doing speeches, like public speaking or whatever. Well, I'm going to butcher it. So I'll just, like to give a long speech, it's easy. To give a short speech, it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
I can talk on culture forever. When you boil it down into one sentence or one word, that's always tougher. John Gordon does the one word type thing. Yeah. But I think this is how we do things here. And what I mean by that is when your players start saying that to other players, that's when you have a culture, both good or bad. It could be a bad culture, hey, we go to parties together or we do this together, if you're in a bike team in the Tour de France, they say, this is how we do things. And then they shoot you up with some drug or something, so it could be a bad culture too, but I think of it as a good culture. This is how we do things here. This is when the players are bought in, when they take ownership and stuff. And when everybody realizes that I own a part of this culture. So if we lose together. If we win together. if you know what, things aren't going well, if we're struggling, if we're having challenges, well, we have to overcome those challenges together. We celebrate successes together. Everything's together. And when you have a culture like that, I think you're going to be much stronger when you're looking for reasons why we can do something. Going back to that, what I said earlier, don't let what you can't do interfere with, or what you can't do interfere with what you can do. And so when you're a can do type culture, when you're solution focused as opposed to, problem fixated, and do what you can do too, because sometimes players will sit around in a locker room and they think they're coming up with solutions like, well, this is what we need to do better. We need to do this play, or we need to do this drill, or they start to take on the role of coach, when really what they need, the solution is, how can we buy in to what we're doing more? How can we buy into our teammates? How can we trust our teammates more? The plays are going to work. I mean, very few coaches run bad plays. They might not explain them well. They might not teach them well, but very few plays are bad. Most of the time it's not executed well. And the reason for that, I would say well, I would actually say it's coaching. Because ultimately as coach, we're responsible. We're responsible for simplifying it. We're responsible for speaking their language, however we can, to get them to understand. But I would also, if I was talking to players, I would say your responsibility, you're 100% responsible for buying in and giving it a chance. And then if it doesn't work, you give it another chance. And if it doesn't work, you give it another chance, and you keep giving it a chance until the season's over. But yeah, this is how we do things here.
So in going through that, you mentioned, you work with professional sports teams, college sports teams, whoever, what were some of the programs that you worked with that you could just feel that they had that good culture, and kind of what made that culture solid?
Yeah. Well, I will speak to two programs that come to mind right away. And one was the Toronto Raptors, their overall culture. And I worked there the year before they won the world championship. I worked with them a few times in the off season during mini camp when Coach Casey, Dwayne Casey, was still their coach, and he actually won Coach of the Year that year, and they got fired as the reigning Coach of the Year. As the coach of But anyways, their culture was surprising to me because I'd only seen it from afar. But when I got into it, all right, the players trusted one another. And the little known fact is that their starters played the least amount of minutes that any starting unit did in the NBA. So conversely, their reserves played more than any reserves did. The starters trusted that if I'm sitting, my backup is going to help us, and that by me sitting, it still helps out our team. So they had a culture of, we don't really care who's playing as long as we're doing what we're supposed to do and we're doing it together, and it's going to pay off. Now, some would say that it didn't pay off, but I would say that's just two words: LeBron James. LeBron James was he was the Michael Jordan to the Cleveland Cavs way back in the day, or to the Utah Jazz. The Raptors would have gotten a chance to go get beat by the Golden State Warriors if it wasn't for LeBron James. LeBron just dominated them in the playoffs, but they had a great culture of everybody believed in one another, and the stars believed in the reserves and vice versa. And the coaching staff, this was the biggest thing that I was surprised about. The coaching staff was coachable. The coaching staff, Dwayne Casey's making millions upon millions of dollars. These are NBA coaches, and they're coachable. They're listening to each other. They're listening to their players. They're listening to me. They're asking me my opinion. I'm like, you don't need to know my opinion. You guys are the NBA coaches. You know your team. But they wanted to make sure they were seeing the whole forest and not just their tree. They wanted to understand. They wanted to see different perspectives. Not that they were going to take my advice or take anyone else's advice, but they wanted to know it. And so they were very coachable. I worked with a college team, and I'll mention the team because I think they have a very good culture and it's not a team that a lot of people would know about, but Alabama Birmingham women's basketball. UAB women's basketball, and their coaching staff does an amazing job of emphasizing culture. They just have a friendly, hey, we care about people. Obviously X's and O's are important, but they are in the people business. It is so obvious. You spend 5 minutes with that coaching staff and they're about the people. They're in the people business. They're in the people development business. And so they have some talented players, but they also invest in them as people. And then those players then are more inspired. And so, I got to work with them quite a bit, and the coaching staff was about people, but also the players themselves. They wanted to be coachable. They wanted to, hey, how can I be better? I'm a pretty good player. I'm all conference or whatever, but I want to be better. I want to constantly be coached up. And so they just had a coachable spirit, which was awesome. And they also didn't have I'm a senior or I'm a junior, I'm the starter, freshman carry my bag. It was all about us, we, us, ours.
It's just so funny before I turn over to Todd, but it's just so funny you brought up UAB women's basketball only because there's like 6 or 7 players from Illinois that play on that team. So it's just so funny of all the teams you brought up, because Todd and I are from Chicago, that was the team you brought up.
Yeah, that is. And I'm pretty sure that the head coach originally was from Illinois. I think he coached boys basketball in high school at Illinois before he went to the college level. And then was an assistant. I think he was an assistant at Missouri on the women's side before getting the UAB job. I forget his resume, but I do think he was in Illinois. And I think one of his assistants was from Illinois as well. So yeah, they do have a little pipeline there. It's probably easier to get kids from Illinois to go down to Alabama into the warmer weather than it is to get Alabama kids to come to Illinois in the snow.
All right, so I'm going to go from my personal experience here. I've been assistant coach a long time, coach at the college level, at the JUCO level. But I've taken over a program this year, right in the middle of COVID. But just in general, there's a lot of coaches out there taking over new programs, going to different places. So as a first-year head coach, or just taking over a program, what are some of the key pillars and things you need to establish as a first-year head coach?
Yeah, the very first thing is you're stupid. You're dumb. No, take it that approach, not that bad, but take it the approach that you still have so much to learn. You have so much to learn. As a young head coach, almost always us as young head coaches, we've been an assistant, we've seen it done, but we have these opinions. We think we would have done it differently than what the head coach was doing. We see things differently than the head coach. And when I'm a head coach, I'm going to do it this way. Or I've gone to all these clinics and I have all these pages of notes and I learn from Coach K or I learn from Tom Izzo or whatever. And I know what I'm going to do. Okay. But you're going to have to adjust. You're going to have to adapt. You're going to have to be coachable. You don't know it all. Don't be arrogant. Invest in people first. And I know I say that, I say that a lot, actually. I haven't said it as much tonight, but invest in your people. It's not enough that you care about your players. They have to know that you care. And I made that mistake early on my first couple of years. I'm running Coach K's stuff. I'm running Tom Izzo's, I'm running Tom Izzo's rebounding stuff, Pat Summit's defense, and Coach K's offense. So I got the trifecta there. I should be pretty good. Triple crown, triple threat. All right. But we're not winning because the players don't believe in me. Now, I care about them a lot. I'm just not showing it. They don't know that I care about them. And I'm also going in there, man, I'm kind of a little, I hate to say arrogant, but it's like, you know what? I paid my dues. I'm a 27-year-old NCAA head coach. Okay. I have busted my tail, sacrificed no social life. I haven't gotten much money these last few years. I've done everything right. I've shaken hands, kissed babies. I've gotten the networking down. Like, I am ready for this job. I have earned it. I know what I'm doing. Okay. But that doesn't matter to that team that I just took over. They don't care about any of that. They want to know, do I want to run through a wall for this guy or not? Am I going to buy into this guy, what he's selling? And I'm telling them, all this stuff. Hey, I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. This will work. This will work. This will work. But they didn't believe in me. So I couldn't get them to believe in the stuff because they have to believe in me first. And they weren't believing in me because all I'm doing is telling them my background. I'm giving them my resume. I'm saying, yeah, this play will work because it worked last year in this situation when we were at Ball State, or when we were at Division III playing at Division I, and this worked then. Well, they don't care about any of that stuff. They don't care why I got the job. Right now they want to be believing in me. They want to buy into me. And I wasn't giving them a reason, because I was looking at them, even though I cared about them, I was kind of looking them as numbers or positions or whatever. And I know that might not be the case with every coach that takes over. That just might be me. But I think we can learn from that. We're in the people business. We're in the people business. X's and O's are really easy for us. The people business isn't. Like if my wife and I are struggling, if we're not communicating well, or we're having a disagreement or whatever, it's really, really easy for me to bring her flowers, chocolates, balloons, or a little card. What's hard for me to do is day in and day out, show her I care, to pick up the socks off the floor, to treat her well. As coaches, it's really easy for us to put in a new play, change up the starting lineup, or make an adjustment to a current play. It's hard for us to dive in and invest in people. But ultimately, we're in a people business. They're executing those plays anyways. And if they don't buy into us, or if they don't buy into each other, then they're not going to run that play well, and we're not going to be very successful.
All right. So now we got that buy-in where we're kind of running. Okay. And this happens all the time. You have a player, a parent in your program. They're struggling to communicate. They're hurting the program. Kind of taken away from that culture. What are some things we could do to help them and kind of, I guess, teach them, right? How we want our coach to be, because that's eventually, to me, that's eventually what it is, right? We're kind of teaching them and helping them learn, like, this is kind of how we're going to do things.
Yeah. Well, you have a come to Jesus meeting with them. No, I mean, that's what a lot of coaches would do. It's going to be my way or the highway. I take a different approach. And now I say this I have taken kids' scholarships away. I have cut people from teams. Okay. So I'm not Mr. Kumbaya. I'm going to give everybody, 57 chances, turn the other cheek for my whole career. I'm not that coach, but I am the coach that, if you're going to get rid of a kid or have this come to Jesus meeting where they might quit, you better make sure that you're right about that. And you better make sure that, and I know you didn't totally ask this question, but an older coach that I really respect, after a few years of coaching, he told me, Jamy, after I'd cut like one of my best players, he said, Jamy, when you cut the worst attitude kid on your team, the second to the worst attitude kid now becomes the worst attitude. And maybe they have just as bad of an attitude, but you never saw it because you were worried about that other kid. And now what you have is just as bad of an attitude, but less talent. So, I think there's a lot of truth to that in terms of, don't be so quick to just get rid of a kid. A lot of kids have redeeming qualities. So I know you weren't totally asking about cutting a kid, but I do think you've got to find some way to bridge that gap and connect with that kid and let them know that you care about them, that they are valued, and that there's something that they could do. Now, for me at the college level, it was a lot easier to show a kid that they're valuable because you recruited them for some reason. But even at the high school level, you kept them on the team for some reason. Now it is slightly different because you might've kept them because you just had to fill the uniforms, or because their dad was on the school board or something. But it's a little tougher for you at the high school level, but still you've got to find value in every one of your kids. And you've got to show them that. And let me tell you, let me go storytelling here. I'll tell you a little story. I'm in 7th grade, and one of my friends named Bill, we are in this class together, and we have this group project. And so we do it's a partner project, and Bill is a screw up. Bill is a terrible kid. Teachers don't like him, but I like him. He's my friend. Okay. We play GI Joes together. We play football together in the backyard, whatever. I like him. And so we get together a couple times. We do this project. He actually works at it hard. Okay. So we turn this project in. The teacher turns it back to us. A few days later, I get an A and Bill gets an F. And I remember the teacher saying, Bill, there's no way that you did this work because I know Jamie is a good student and you're not. And there's no way you could have done this work. Okay, fast forward 5 years and Bill kills a couple people. He spirals into drugs, kills a couple people. Okay. I have no crystal ball. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that there was one time at least for sure that I witnessed that there was a chance for an authority figure to catch Bill doing good, to add value to his life and to catch him at a moment when you could have boosted his confidence. Now, I don't know what would have happened if he had given him that A. Maybe the same stuff would have happened, but I do know that there was a chance that an authority figure had a chance to do that and didn't do it. I think about that story often. As a coach, I thought about it. I still think about it often because how do we know that we're not experiencing that one time that this kid has, this one chance that maybe a kid had, or this one chance that this parent has? We all have these parents that we can't stand, these parents that we think are bad influences or whatever. But there might be a time that there's a kind word we can utter or something we can say that's nice. Or, hey, we just go up to this parent. Hey, Bill was really good at practice today. He did this, this, and this. And that's exactly what I think he could do that all the time. This was awesome. That might be the one thing that starts to melt that ice there with the parent. So as much as you can catch people being good, I think that's an important thing. But I do think you should connect. And going back to one of your the very first question about COVID, now is a great time to melt some of that ice, to break down some of those barriers with those more challenging kids or more challenging parents, because you're not dealing with playing time right now. You're not dealing with yelling at their kid. If we were not in COVID, I would be saying right now, okay, or I would be saying, hey, if you're not in season right now, let's say you're a fall sport, let's say you're a football coach and you have a kid or a parent who's really you're struggling with, but maybe they play baseball. Maybe they play basketball. Well, in the wintertime or in the springtime, you're going to those games and you're not sitting next to that parent because they don't like you. They don't want you to sit next to them. But you're going to say 2 sentences to them at one game. You're going to say 3 sentences at the next game, 4 sentences the next game. You're just going to say something nice to them. You're going to look at it as a long game and you're going to start to build a bridge. You're going to start to connect with them. Same way with the kid. Kid sees coach coming to his basketball games, or coming to whatever, his swim meets, or coming to his, whatever soccer matches. Coach didn't have to do that, but coach is doing that. And you're not making a point that I'm only here for you, but you are definitely making a point that I'm going to say hi and I'm going to be friendly. And that just starts, it's baby steps. So pretty much anything you can do to connect with people.
So we usually ask an after the timeout question. Sometimes it's to a coach. We're gonna pivot this one to after the season, because I think this is something that me and John have both done before. After the season, with players and as a coach, how do you reflect on that season and kind of evaluate where the players were and where your program is?
Yeah, great question. 2 things come to mind right away. Number one is I know that this isn't the impetus behind your question, or I know this isn't what you're getting at with the question, but I think coaches really screw up. I think ADs screw up. I think principals screw up. I think employers screw up because they only have one evaluation meeting during the year. They save everything for that one time, after the season. And then we just, flood a kid with this. These are the 5 things you did wrong, or these are the things that irritated me, or you're fired. Well, why am I fired? Or why am I cut? Or why you started me all year. I didn't know you were mad at me, or I didn't know you didn't think I could play, or whatever. So I think that I think that you want to have a culture, a coaching culture, a culture of coaching year round. Or you could say a culture of evaluation year round, but you're always trying to coach them up. So you naturally want to equip your kids with the skills necessary to do their job or to play their position or whatever. But then you need to enhance them during the year, enrich them during the year, constantly be coaching them up. And that requires evaluation. Don't wait till the end to evaluate them. Now, with all that being said, to answer your question, one of the things I would do is get them talking. You want to understand where they're coming from. So at the end of the year, hey, how'd you think the season went? What's something you could have improved on? What was something you liked? What was something how could I have coached you better? We oftentimes don't ask that, sometimes because we don't want to actually know the answer, or we don't care to know it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you say, because I'm going to coach the way I coach. But get them talking. Once again, listen with the intent of understanding. Learn to listen to learn. And I think that's important for coaches at the end of the year when they're evaluating not only the kid, but their program, because you're going to get some information. If 3 of your kids tell you kind of the same thing, even if they're all best friends and they run in a clique, well, that tells you though that you didn't do your job, or something is lacking somewhere in your program. It doesn't mean that you have to totally change your program, but it does tell you that, hey, maybe I need to do a little bit better job of addressing this next year, or more importantly, addressing it now in the off season. How can we prepare now for next season? But get them talking. Also, if you've got a list of 3 things, all right, these are the 3 things that I want Todd to do better next year. These are the 3 biggest weaknesses Todd has. Well, I need to ask Todd what he thinks he needs to improve upon. Because if you can give me 2 of those things, let's say, or even 1 of those, now you own it. You're invested in that, because Todd, you just said that to me. It's not coach's thing. Like, I could tell you those same 3 things, and even though those are the 3 things you would have told me, now all of a sudden it's coach's thing. Coach told me this. It's not, this is what I told coach. This is what I think. And I would go so far, even flipping around to the start of the season, when you do goals, when you do stuff like that, or even team standards, team rules, bring them into the process, because the more that they can say the things that you would have said, now they own it, as opposed to it's coach's thing. As much as possible, have them talk, and they're not going to say dumb things most of the time. Hey Todd, what are 3 things or 2 things that you think you really need to work on? They're not going to give you, they're not going to give you, well, I think I need to hand the cups to the trainer better, and I need to fold my clothes better, or hang up my uniform. I mean, they're not going to say dumb things, because first of all, they're probably scared. They're probably a little intimidated being in this meeting. So they're going to say something. And even if they don't believe it, they're going to say something. And now all of a sudden it's out there. And you can use that, next year in the off season. Hey, Todd, remember when you were in the office and you said that, this is really an area that you need to work on. How's that coming? What are you doing? What's your plan? How can I help with that? That kind of stuff.
I'm like taking notes as you're talking. So we like to finish with a fun, or an informative, top 5. And, we've talked a lot today about leadership, and we've talked a lot today about culture. If you were building a leader, and I'm big on leadership, I read the John Gordon books myself, as well as your book. What are the top 5 qualities that make someone a great leader to you?
Oh my word. That's tough, because everything's good, but, responsibility, without a doubt, responsibility. You have to take responsibility for your actions. And that kind of goes to one, Todd, what you said earlier about the 10 things all players can do. The very first one is lose the excuses. We have to be responsible for our actions. This is almost defining the word with the definition, or rhyming a word with the same word, but be a leader. What's the best qualities of leadership is actually choosing to be a leader, stepping up there and saying, I am going to influence people. I am going to step up. I'm not going to wait for somebody else to do it. So I am going to be a leader, and we are all leaders. I think that's important. And we don't ever say that as a leadership quality, because it's using the same word, but you actually have to choose to lead. And there's a lot of kids on our teams that either don't want to lead, or don't think that they are able to lead because I'm just a freshman, or I'm not the captain. And so you have to step up and be willing to lead. Empathy, or understanding, perspective, those will all be the same thing. Kind of, you have to understand. You can't be a good leader if you don't have empathy, or you can't walk a mile in someone's shoes or understand where they're coming from. This goes with politics. This goes with family, business, sports teams. It doesn't matter. If you don't understand where the other side is coming from, you're going to struggle. And as coaches, we're older than our players. We're an authority figure. We think like a coach, not a player. And even us as a 16-year-old is different than them as a 16-year-old. And so we have to understand, be empathetic, see their perspective. I'm going to cheat and say those were, that was 5. I gave you a bunch of words, but yeah, the integrity. I mean, I gotta, the funny thing is I started writing one of my books, the leadership playbook, and I wanted to have the starting 5 principles everybody has to have. And I forget what it is. I think I came up with like 10 or something. These are the 10 basics. And it's like, I start writing and I'm like, all of these things, I can't not have this one. I just felt like, man, well, if I write this one, then I've got to have this one. And then I've got to have this one. But integrity, you've got to have some integrity or character. That goes a long way. Are you who you say you are? Are you going to do what you say you're going to do? And attitude, you've got to have a proper attitude. You've got to have a good attitude. When things suck, when things are going bad, are you going to make the best of it? So, John Gordon talks about positive leadership, so you got to have a positive attitude. It doesn't mean that it's always rainbows and butterflies, but man, it means that, I'm going to do what I can to find solutions and make the best of it. So, what I have: responsibility, integrity, empathy / understanding / perspective,
responsibility, and be
attitude,
a leader.
A leader. Yeah. I forgot be a leader, step up, choose to be a leader. My podcast is called Success is a Choice. And we talk a lot about choices. You're going to make, are your choices you're making today on par with the goals you have tomorrow? Where do you want to end up? And are you making the choices to get there? And in the same way, failure is a choice too. We choose all the time to fail. I don't want to get out of bed on time, or I don't want to do this, or I don't want to do that. Well, nobody chose that for you. You chose it yourself. Now we might make excuses, when I'm late for school, or I'm late for work, I'm going to make excuses, but the reality is I didn't leave in time. I didn't get ready, and I didn't prepare ahead of time and account for, maybe there's a train, maybe there's traffic. And so, it's ultimately up to us. We make choices every day that determine our success or failure.
Coach, we couldn't be more thankful for you joining us. Listeners, if you have not checked out his book, The Bus Trip, I myself did read it. Phenomenal book, great fable about, bringing a team together. Follow Coach at Coach BECHLER on Twitter. But Coach, again, we couldn't be more happy, enthusiastic, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely, guys. I appreciate you having me. Keep up the good work you guys are doing, both as a coach and with your podcast, because, you're coach, you're on the front lines as a coach. And then with the podcast, you're helping coach other coaches. So it's awesome. So thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Coach. We appreciate your time. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the After the Timeout podcast. For more information and upcoming episodes, follow us on Twitter at After the Timeout, or subscribe to our podcast for upcoming episodes. You can find all of our episodes on Anchor.fm, Spotify, Overcast, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts by searching After the Timeout. Thank you for listening.